boy's fading," whispered the doctor, pulling back with trembling hands. The lantern cast its glow across the cabin's wood-paneled walls. Outside, wind brushed cold against the windows. Inside, all was still except for the weak, ragged breaths of 8-year-old Daniel, the only son of widow Martha Granger. Martha's hands trembled as she gripped the quilt. "He's burning up. God, please don't take him." Her voice was cracked, like something broken long ago. She wiped tears with a sleeve and dug her nails into her arm just to stay conscious. Just to stay present. A man's voice rose in a harsh whisper. "We got no choice, Martha. Only one person left." "No," she snapped through tears. "Don't speak her name in this house." The doctor stood. His hat trembled in his hands. "Martha, I'm sorry. I've done everything I could. The fever is in his blood now. He won't make it through sunrise." The cabin fell into stunned silence. Then it came. A voice from the doorway, gravelly, aged, and filled with dread. Only the witch would dare lay hands on a child tonight. Martha's heart froze. Behind her, someone spat on the floorboards. Another muttered, "She cursed her own kin, you asking her to claim this one too?" Clara. The name lurked in the corners of every story whispered in town. Hazel-eyed, silver-haired, and alone by choice or by punishment. Some said her husband left after their baby died. Some said she killed them both. All agreed on one thing. Clara walked with shadows. "She's no witch," Martha whispered, though even she wasn't sure anymore. "Just broken." "She knows things," replied the rancher by the window, his rough hands clenched. "Old things. Things buried under dirt and bone." The room felt smaller now. Martha felt her pulse pound in her ears. Daniel coughed a sharp, horrifying sound, and his eyes rolled back. Martha screamed and caught him. His skin was boiling. He no longer recognized her face or her touch. And that was when the doctor said it. "He's dying, Martha, unless you call her." There it was a mother's worst choice. Lose her boy or put him in the hands of a woman the whole town feared. A woman who whispered to broken things and made light flicker when she prayed. Thunder rumbled outside as if echoing her decision. Finally, Martha stood, voice barely holding. "Go get her. I don't care what it costs." The rancher darted out into the storm. Minutes stretched. Daniel's quivers slow, his lips pale. One woman cried softly under her breath. The doctor wiped his brow, defeated. Martha rested her forehead against her son's, willing her warmth into his cooling body. Then footsteps. Slow, steady. Heavy like death had brought its own midwife. Clara stood in the doorway, her face half hidden beneath the brim of her old leather hat. Wind pushed in behind her, making the lantern flicker wildly. She did not speak at first, just stared at the boy and then at Martha, eyes hollow yet deep with something unspoken. "You called me," she finally said. Her voice was unexpectedly soft. "You're not welcome here," someone barked. "You shouldn't have come." Clara didn't flinch. "I'm not here to be welcome." Martha's voice cracked, torn between terror and desperate hope. "Please, save him." Clara stepped in, and as she did, the lantern flame guttered and went dark. Clara's boots thudded softly against the cabin floor as she drew closer to the boy. The lantern sputtered back to life with her movement, casting long shadows across her face. No one could see her eyes clearly, but they felt her stare all the same. "Not beyond saving," she murmured, almost as if speaking only to herself. "Not yet." "You don't have the right to touch him," snarled a man on the back wall, one of the ranch hands who'd lost his wife the winter before. "Not after what they say you did." Clara didn't look up. They say a lot. Doesn't make it truth. Martha stood rooted to the spot, caught between righteous fury and fragile hope. If you harm him, she began, voice trembling. Clara raised a hand. I came to heal, not to harm. Whispers shook through the cabin. Liar. Witch. She cursed her own blood. Clara ignored them all. She drew a leather pouch from the folds of her coat and untied the string with steady hands. Dried sage, green, flecked with silver. A twist of willow bark. A sprig of feverfew. Herbs the townsfolk had seen, but never together. She arranged them in a precise pattern on the side table by the boy's bed. Martha, watching every move, asked through clenched teeth, "What are those?" "Things older than fear," Clara said simply. Then she looked at Daniel, really looked, and something behind her mask cracked. Her voice dropped to an intimate whisper. "Boy, can you hear me?" She brushed his matted hair back. "I've seen these shadows, years ago." Martha stiffened. "That sickness killed my husband." Clara's hands paused. Killed more than just husbands. Emotion flickered in her tone, fleeting, immediately hidden. Dr. Hughes stepped closer. "If you're going to do something, do it fast." Clara gave a small nod and crushed the willow bark in her palm, releasing a sharp scent. She placed it near Daniel's mouth. "Breathe it in," she urged. "Come back." But the boy's breathing was shallow, skin the color of ash. Clara pressed 2 fingers gently to his throat. Counted, waited, murmured under her breath, not words anyone recognized, but sounds heavy with meaning. The ranch hand took a step forward. "You're mumbling curses," he spat. "No," Clara said, her voice barely holding. "I am praying." Martha swallowed, a strange moment of empathy cutting through her fear. The look in Clara's eyes. Was it grief? "You've lost someone," she said quietly. Clara didn't answer. But the flicker in her composure was answer enough. Silence followed her movements. She placed her hands, weathered, strong, steady on the boy's heart. Martha stepped closer as if pulled by invisible thread. "She has no right," muttered someone again. Clara pressed her palms lightly. "Life and death aren't rights. They're roads. I'm just walking with him." Her voice had no tremor now, only resolve. Daniel shivered. A sharp wheeze escaped his chest. His eyes fluttered once, then fell still. "Is it working?" Martha's voice broke. Clara closed her eyes. "Yes, if the boy still wants to stay." The crowd murmured. Fear, doubt, faith. Clara began whispering again. Martha leaned in, lips parted, hearing certain words this time. Words like save, words like son. Something hardened in her expression. "What did you just say?" Martha asked. But Clara didn't respond. Voices rose again in alarm. "Step away from him! She's taking his spirit." And then Daniel's body jerked violently. His back arched, his jaw clenched. Martha screamed, grabbing his shoulders, and realized Clara's hands hadn't moved at all. Daniel was twisting on his own. Clara whispered one more word, and Martha's breath caught. Clara leaned over Daniel, her breath synced to his in slow, rhythmic cadence, but his breaths were getting weaker. She pressed her palms gently against his chest, murmuring in a steady hum. It wasn't English, nor was it any language the people in that room had ever heard before. Some ancient lullaby, some forgotten prayer. Outside, a coyote howled. Inside, fear thickened. "What is she doing?" shouted the rancher, panic cutting through his drawl. Martha stared, her face contorted, torn between faith and horror. Daniel's body shook only slightly, his breaths gasping, fading. Beside her, the doctor stammered. We're losing him. Clara's eyes stayed shut. Not yet, she whispered. Not while he still fights. But her hands, they trembled, just enough to betray her stillness. It's witchcraft, someone yelled. She's killing him. Martha lurched forward, grabbing Clara's arm. You said you'd save him. He's slipping. I know what I said, Clara said coldly, shaking her off. And I don't give up. The sheriff stepped forward now, tall, mustached, a man used to being obeyed. He stopped just short of Clara, hand resting on the worn grip of his revolver. You're done here, he snapped. Let go. Clara did not move. Sweat pooled at her brow. Her voice grew louder, untamed like it was pulled from old mountains. Daniel's breathing rattled, each inhale weaker than the last. His little hand dropped off the bed, fingers limp. Martha collapsed to her knees beside the bed, hands clutched around her son's arm. She sobbed with a sound that no word could capture. He's dying, she gasped. You're killing him. Clara's jaw clenched. Her words pressed deep, as if each one cost her more than breath. There is more at work here than fever. The sheriff scoffed. Spare us your riddles. You're a fraud. I've seen doctors, and you ain't one. Clara slowly rose to her feet. The room fell silent. She met the sheriff's eyes without flinching. Doctors didn't save my boy, Sheriff. Didn't save any of the ones they buried under oak trees. The sheriff flinched at her words, humiliation meant for her, now turned back on him. But before he could respond, Daniel exhaled one final breath. A long, hollow sigh. Then nothing. The silence was unbearable. Martha's scream tore through it, raw with anguish. No, God, please, no! Clara's shoulders sank. Her hands fell to her sides, but she did not weep. Her face was stone, carved by some ancient sorrow. The room erupted. You promised us. Get her out! Devil woman! Clara didn't defend herself. She didn't fight. She just stood there, eyes lowered, face unreadable, while the stitch of every insult cut deeper. You're a curse, Clara, the rancher hissed. You bring death, not healing. Martha wailed, knuckles white around her son. You said he wasn't beyond saving. Clara spoke quietly, voice barely above a whisper. He isn't. But no one heard her. Not over the rage, the hatred, the collective fear of a world they couldn't control. And then Clara's head tilted slightly. She reached out one hand, hovering it inches above the boy's forehead. Her lip trembled. He's not gone yet, she said. Sheriff Brooks cursed, reaching for her. Stop touching him. Clara ignored him. Her fingers, open like a call for mercy, hovered, then slowly landed on Daniel's brow. In the dead quiet, Daniel's body twitched once. He's not gone yet, Clara whispered, her fingertips resting gently on Daniel's brow. Her voice was thin, like a fraying rope tarred with memory and pain. The crowd fell silent, eyes transfixed. Clara inched closer, her breath uneven, though her tone remained controlled. I've seen eyes like his before, she said quietly. Someone spat on the floor. You're raving. But she wasn't. Not now. Not ever. Clara's gaze drifted somewhere far from the cabin to another time. Another room, another child. She barely spoke above the wind's moan. Once, my boy lay like this. Same fever, same breath. Slipping. Martha's head snapped up. You had a child? She asked, voice hoarse. Clara nodded once. They said it was my fault, Clara continued. That I invited the devil into my house. That I cursed him by loving him too much. They wouldn't bury him. Not in church ground. So I dug myself. Beneath a willow where no one stands now. Her words, raw with memory, cut through the cabin like a blade. I never saw his eyes that last night, she said, and the trembling began. They shut before I got there, and I have carried that darkness ever since. The sheriff grunted. So now you take another child to make peace with your ghosts. Clara didn't respond. Instead, she lifted Daniel's chin gently, revealing the pale, dusty lashes of a boy on the edge. He's fighting, she said. Not for breath, for permission. He needs to know if someone still wants him here. Tears slipped from Martha's eyes as she stroked her son's hair. I want him. God, I want him. Clara nodded, then leaned closer. A whisper from her lips, unintelligible, ancient. A noise like wind through the canyon stone. A question asked in a language no townfolk could know, but every mother might understand in her marrow. Then Daniel gasped. A sharp, violent inhale. His chest rose. Air poured back into his lungs like water into a dry riverbed. Someone shouted. More than one person stumbled backward. The ranch hand crossed himself. The doctor's jaw dropped. Clara's eyes widened, not with victory, but stunned disbelief. Daniel's pulse fluttered, weak, fragile. But there. Martha collapsed across his tiny chest, sobbing hard new tears now, full of disbelief and trembling hope. He's alive. He's breathing. Clara held up a hand, voice steady. Don't thank me. He chose to stay. The room buzzed with confusion, panic, awe. Someone whispered, Is it a trick? Another. A curse. But Clara didn't care. Her eyes were wet now. Though she didn't cry, couldn't. Instead, she stood slowly, smoothing her coat and turning away. But before she stepped, she said, Loving someone doesn't make you cursed. It was unclear who she meant, perhaps all of it. But as Clara walked away from the bedside, her shadow stretched long and dark behind her. And in that moment, when half the room recoiled and the other half wondered if miracles walk as flesh, Martha lifted her head. Through tears, she looked across the cabin and spoke. If you felt what I'm feeling, she whispered, voice steadying, then ride with Clara and with true Western stories, where every broken tale gets a second chance. Clara stopped her back to them, but her shoulders eased slightly as if she'd heard. Clara turned back toward the boy, and for a fleeting second his eyes flashed the color of hers. For a moment too long, no one breathed. Daniel's eyelids fluttered, then lifted slowly, painfully. His gaze swept across the room, searching, settling. Martha froze. Her breaths came sharp and shallow. Then she screamed, That's not my son! He had her son's eyes! Her voice cracked the silence like a whip. Panic rippled in every direction. Some shouted in defense, others in horror. Martha stumbled backward, nearly tripping over her own feet as she clung to the bed frame. Clara's chest tightened. She stepped forward, staring at Daniel, at the strange, uncanny flicker of hazel in his gaze. A color not his. A color her own child once had. Black magic, Sheriff Brooks muttered under his breath, real fear creeping into his tone. The doctor backed away, eyes wide. This isn't natural. Get her out, now. Martha trembled, inching toward the wall. You didn't save him, she choked. You changed him. Clara's face curled not into anger, but into an expression Martha had never seen from her. Devastation. No, Clara said, her voice raw at the edges. I didn't change him. I tried to save him. That's all I ever wanted to do. For him, and for the one I lost. She turned then not to Daniel or Martha, but to the room, to the whispers, to the lies she'd siphoned in silence for years. You all think you know me, she said bitterly. You think you know what took my son, or why I buried him under a willow tree without a priest or a friend to mourn with. You think I chose that life? The rancher bit his tongue, haunted, by the shift in her tone. No longer a witch, suddenly a grieving mother, bearing her skin without armor. Clara continued. He got sick. A fever like this boy, but I was too late. He died with no one to hold his hand. Not a doctor. Not a flock of praying townsfolk. Not a God that listened. Her voice fractured, but she forced it steady. And when I came back with his body, you closed your doors, every one of you. You called me a curse when really I was just broken. Daniel's small voice suddenly rose, no longer weak, suddenly sharp enough to slice the room in half. Mother? Martha spun, eyes filled with terror. But Daniel wasn't looking at her. He was looking directly at Clara. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Who are you talking to? Martha demanded. Who did you just call? Clara knelt beside him, careful, trembling. He's confused, she said, but her voice betrayed doubt. Daniel's stare didn't waver. In the silence, it felt as though the world held its breath. The sheriff's hand dropped to his holster. Step away, Clara. Whatever's in that boy ain't meant to stay. Clara turned sharply, eyes hardening. If I wanted to take something, Sheriff, don't you think I would have done it long before he opened his eyes? The room fell into a hush of conflict, accusation, and truth pulled like rope between them all. Martha swallowed hard. If your son's in him, then whose does mine belong to now? Clara's face fell like stone. I don't know. Her admission hung in the air, stark and cold. And in that moment, with lantern light catching those strange hazel eyes, Daniel whispered something so quiet only Clara heard it. Her eyes widened, and for the first time Clara looked terrified. Daniel's voice broke into a whisper, and he said her dead son's name. Daniel's lips trembled. His breaths came slow. Then, with a sudden clarity that chilled the room, he whispered, Tell Mama to stop calling my name. It hurts. Clara froze. So did the sheriff. Martha blinked, searching for meaning until she saw Clara's face, drained of all color. That was his last breath, Clara whispered. My boy. He said those exact words. To me. No one else was there. The room exhaled as one, then broke into chaos. That's it, the rancher shouted, lunging toward the door. I'm getting a shotgun! No, Martha screamed, dragging herself between Daniel and the doorway. Wait! Daniel's body convulsed, eyes rolling as he gasped again. But not for air, for memory. Echoes no child alive should hold. Mama, he murmured again. Then with eerie familiarity. It's cold underground. I don't want the worms. Clara stumbled backward, her knees buckling. It was too much, too close. She had sat at her own child's grave after dark, whispering those words over and over until her voice went hoarse and her soul got quiet, until grief became her only language. Clara, Martha cried, grabbing her arm. What is happening to him? What have you done? I didn't do this, Clara said, her voice empty. Something is speaking through him. The sheriff stepped forward, revolver now drawn. I should have never let you in this house. This ain't healing. This is possession. Clara's eyes shot a quick warning. Shoot me, and you'll damn the boy. You already did, he snapped. The doctor, trembling, backed against the wall. This isn't medicine. This is madness. Martha turned to Clara, eyes quivering like a hunted deer. If you've brought something unholy into my son, you tell me now. Clara struggled to hold her gaze. I don't know. All I wanted was to keep him breathing. I prayed like any mother would. I begged, and when nothing answered me, I kept begging. Daniel whimpered on the table, voice weaker now, but still carrying the words of a child long gone. Clara moved to him slowly, deliberately. These are echoes, she whispered. Not your son. Not mine. Something between. Tears coursed down Martha's cheeks. But he's saying things only you would know. We all carry scars with voices, Martha, Clara said softly. We beg for them to mean something more than pain. The words hung like a confession. Martha sank to her knees beside her son again, but this time she looked Clara straight in the eye, broken open and raw. Then help me understand. Help me believe this isn't some twisted punishment. Clara reached for Daniel's hand, a mother's instinct overriding logic. She closed her eyes, letting his small fingers press against her palm. This boy isn't possessed, Martha. He's calling something lost. The sheriff scoffed. You want us to believe this is some kind of reunion? No, Clara whispered, heart pounding. Not reunion. Not yet. The rancher burst back through the door, shotgun in hand, eyes burning. Enough. That boy's got death in him, and she said it herself. We ain't watching another town fall from her curse. Clara stood slowly, voice shaking but clear. You try to take that child, you'll regret what comes next. Martha put up her hand. Nobody touches my son. Her voice was flame and fury now. Not her. Not you. Not death. Daniel's trembling stopped, and suddenly he breathed out the sheriff's first name. Daniel's chest rose and fell in shallow, jerking motions. His pupils flickered as if tracking someone unseen. Clara knelt beside him, her breath quickening, and then it came. Tell Mama, Daniel whispered, voice foreign, ancient in its ache. Tell her to stop calling my name. It hurts. Clara's heart stopped. No one in that room knew that sentence. Not even the wind that carried rumors about her. Martha staggered backward, clutching her shawl. What did he say? Clara, what was that? Clara trembled. She whispered, barely audible. Those were his last words. My boys. No one heard but me. For a moment, silence smothered the room, then everything shattered. You're poisoning him with demons, someone screamed. No, Martha cried, voice thick with hysteria. Clara, make it stop. Explain it. The rancher slammed a fist against the wall. Enough of this devil talk. I'm getting a gun. Stay back, Martha screamed. But he was already out the door. Daniel gasped again, mouth twitching with words that weren't his. It's cold. The ground feels cold. Don't leave me there alone. Clara's body folded over as if struck. Her voice cracked. Those were the words I heard before. They buried him without blessing. I was too late. Tears she had denied for years spilled freely now. The sheriff stepped forward, voice low and filled with dread. I don't know what this is, Clara, but it's damned wrong. Clara's teeth clenched. You'd prefer he died mute with your pity? He said nothing. Martha grabbed Clara's wrist. Are you using my son to speak to yours? To take his life and give your boy's voice back? Clara looked directly into Martha's eyes, eyes fractured with wrath and fear. Martha, I would give anything to hear my son speak again. But this, I didn't ask for this. I never controlled what grief brings forward. Daniel's voice came again, softer now. Mama, don't cry. I'll come back if you stop calling. Clara stared into space, lost. I called for months, even into the dirt. This is my punishment. Martha's voice broke. We all beg to believe our scars mean something more than pain, Clara. But if this is some twisted trade... Trade? Clara snapped, voice sharp as the storm outside. No, this is a haunting. Not by me, by grief. The kind that stains you and won't let you die. She turned to the sheriff. You ever see a mother bury her child, alone? His jaw went rigid. A silent answer in his look. The rancher's boots thundered back and shotgun raised. Move aside, Martha. That boy's possessed. Touch him and you'll meet the same curse, Clara said, standing over the boy like a shield. Martha threw out an arm. No guns! Not near my son! The sheriff dragged the rancher back. Put down the gun, pal. Last thing this town needs is a dead kid and a legend. Daniel stopped breathing again. Martha let out a ragged cry. Clara lowered her forehead to Daniel's, whispering faint, haunting syllables that sounded like sorrow wrapped in prayer. His eyes jerked open. And then he spoke the sheriff's first name. Sheriff Brooks went pale as Daniel repeated that name, followed by a secret no one else should have known. They dragged her out into the dark. Clara didn't fight. She only watched the shadows of lanterns bounce off the dirt road as they hauled her toward the old barn behind the church. She didn't speak as someone bound her wrists, nor when the rancher sneered, "Let's see your witchcraft help you now." Her silence was a sentence of its own. They shoved her inside, slammed the heavy wooden doors, and dropped the metal latch. The room went black except for a sliver of moonlight spilling through warped boards. Clara sat in the center of the barn, palms open in her lap, breathing slow. She hadn't cried since the boy spoke her son's words, but her body shook now, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Outside, a crowd murmured like a river of judgment rising. Some wanted to see her burn, said she'd stolen the boy's soul. Others whispered that maybe she was the rare kind, the kind that God sends through storms to save just one life. And others just stood quiet, haunted by their own ghosts, wondering if they were staring at a sinner or the last saint the frontier might ever know. Inside the barn, Clara stared upward, seeing nothing. Her mind wasn't in the present. It was in the dirt. A grave she'd dug under a willow who'd never stop whispering back. She saw her son's face with every blink. The floor creaked. Clara didn't move. "Mama?" A child's voice whispered from nowhere. Clara closed her eyes, jaw tightening. "You're not real." "Yes, I am," said the voice echoing in her mind, like a memory she hadn't invited but never exercised. She pressed her forehead to her knees, breathing through her grief until the voice faded. Grief had become her tormentor, her scripture. Now it was her judge. Minutes later, the barn door creaked open. A single lantern flickered in the gap. Martha slipped through, letting it close behind her. Clara didn't lift her head. She could smell the hay, the dust, and the fear swirling around Martha's shaking steps. "They'll kill you," Martha said, voice thick. "If Daniel dies, they'll hang you before sunrise." Clara laughed, a broken thing. "That's not new. They've been burying me alive for years." Martha knelt in front of her, lantern glow reflecting tears. "Clara, I don't know what you've done or what's happening to my boy, but please, I need truth. All of it." Clara looked up. Her face was pale, eyes glassy like frost over deep water. "You want truth?" Martha nodded. "The dead speak," Clara said softly, voice trembling. "Not like the preacher says. Not in poems or prayers. They speak through what we carry, the things we didn't say, the things we couldn't do. They echo in the living until someone listens." Martha swallowed, inching closer. "Is that what he's doing? Echoing your son?" Clara's voice dropped, almost reverent. "He's not just echoing, he's reaching. Maybe your boy stands near a place mine has been waiting, a place where time blurs and mothers weep the same language." Martha wiped her face. "I never asked to carry this." "None of us do," Clara whispered. "But if your boy comes back, it won't be because I took something. It'll be because sorrow led him halfway, and love called him the rest." Martha's hand shook. "Then what do I do?" "Listen," Clara said. even if it breaks you. A loud bang hit the barn door. "Time's up!" Sheriff Brooks yelled. "Martha, you in there?" Martha stood trembling, lantern shaking in her grasp. Clara sat, palms open, eyes still. As Martha reached for the door, she froze, hearing a child's voice whisper from inside the barn. "Mama, don't let them take her." The sound of that voice, fragile, echoing, impossible, froze Martha where she stood. She didn't look back. She didn't speak. She simply raised the lantern toward the rafters, heart pounding like a stampede. But there was no child in the barn, only Clara, still seated on the dirt, staring into the dark as if someone had whispered through her bones. Sheriff Brooks banged the barn door again. "Martha, open up now!" But there was no time to respond because, across the field, a scream ripped through the night. Martha recognized it instantly, a mother's scream. Her lantern hit the dirt, and she burst through the barn doors. Clara rose in the same breath, breaking the ropes around her wrists with a sharp snap. The sheriff reached for his gun, but stopped. No one moved to block her. Because something was wrong. The cabin behind them, where Daniel lay, was alive with panic. People screamed. The doctor shouted orders no one obeyed, and as Clara sprinted toward the open doorway, Martha saw why. Daniel's body convulsed violently. His back arched, his fingers clawed at the air. His eyes shifted color like ripples of storm water under lightning, hazel, blue, black. The scalpels on the doctor's table shook. The candle on the fireplace flared high. The rancher, halfway into the room, stumbled back and crossed himself. Everyone stood frozen as Clara crossed the threshold, slow at first, then faster, with a purpose that pulled the air in behind her. "No more harm," she whispered under her breath. "Not tonight. Not him." No one stopped her. She knelt beside the bed again. This time there were no herbs, no chants, no mystic trinkets or whispered riddles. Just Clara hands trembling, breath unsteady, pressing her palms over Daniel's heart. "Your path's not mine," she murmured, "and mine is no longer yours to carry." Daniel's face twisted, anguish etched across features too young to hold it. The crowd watched, horrified. Then Clara leaned close and spoke not to the boy, but to something else. It wasn't spellcraft. It wasn't ritual. It was a mother's prayer. "Sorrow ends now," she whispered. "Not in graves, not in borrowed breath." Her voice cracked, no longer a whisper, now a plea. "You gave me life, even when you left me. I don't want ghosts anymore. I want my son to rest." Daniel stopped shaking. His body went still too still. Martha gasped, stepping forward. "Clara." Clara pressed her forehead to his. Tears poured silently. A sob caught in her throat. "Let mine be the price," she said through shaking lips. "Just let him live." A heavy hush fell over the room. The rancher couldn't look away. Sheriff Brooks lowered his gun. The doctor's hands dropped to his sides. The lantern flickered once, and then Daniel exhaled. Not a gasp. Not a death rattle. A breath. Even. Steady. Alive. Clara's shoulders sagged. Her hands slipped from his chest. No strength left. She crumpled beside the bed, resting her cheek against the wooden floor. Sweat gleamed across her brow. Her eyes were half open, no longer seeing the room. She had given all she had. "Clara?" Martha whispered, stepping close. "Did you—" Clara's voice barely rose. "Not magic. Just love paid forward." Daniel stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Not hazel, nor black, nor strange, just the soft brown he'd always had. He blinked up at his mother and whispered, "Mama?" Martha wrenched him close, sobbing against his hair. But Clara didn't move. "Not at all." Clara, Clara, wake up. Martha's voice broke like a brittle twig as she shook Clara's shoulder, once, twice, 3 times. But Clara did not stir. Her face was slack, peaceful, as if she'd simply gone to sleep on the cabin floor. But the silence surrounding her was too pure, too final. Martha's knees buckled. She dropped beside Clara, pressing her forehead to the woman's motionless chest. The floorboards beneath them trembled with her sobs, all the anger, the doubt, the suspicion, gone. Only sorrow remained. "You gave him back to me," she cried, "and I couldn't save you back." Daniel held close against her, blinked in confusion. He reached out a small hand, gently placing it on Clara's shoulder. "She was the lady who prayed," he whispered. The room was still as a church after last rites. Outside, the crowd had gone quiet, too. The rancher, hair wet with sweat and regret, stood in the doorway. He lowered his hat. Dr. Hughes cleared his throat, wiping his glasses on his sleeve. She saved him," he said, a voice hollowed out. "No medicine did that." Sheriff Brooks looked down at Clara, this woman he once swore to run out of his town. His raw voice scratched against the weight in his chest. "Damn me. I let words blind me to what she really was." Someone in the back whispered, "Saints seldom wear halos when they walk among us." One by one, townsfolk stepped inside. Some hesitated, fear still clinging to their bones. Others came humbly, shoulders slumped, eyes full of quiet repentance. A woman laid a handkerchief on Clara's chest. Another a dried flower. A man whispered, "Forgive me." No one spoke loudly. Reverence hung thick in the room, the kind that only comes after someone gives everything. Martha lifted her head, eyes raw and red. "She was never a witch," she said, not pleading, not protesting, declaring. She was a mother who didn't let go. When the world called her cursed, she held on. When we wouldn't let her grieve, she walked alone. She turned toward the crowd, her son still against her heart. And when this town refused her grace, she gave it anyway. The crowd bowed their heads, clinging to her words like a sermon they'd needed all along. Daniel suddenly looked up and whispered, "Mama, can she hear us?" Martha brushed his cheek. "I think she can. I think she always has." A hush fell again. Someone suggested they bury her in the church cemetery. Others nodded. A few hesitated. Then the sheriff stepped forward, placing his hand gently on Clara's still shoulder. "No more grave without blessing. Not for her, not in this town. She lies with honor now." And so, as the sun dipped low behind faded hills, the people who once spat her name carried Clara's body down the quiet road, past the ranches that scorned her, the saloon where she was called poison, the chapel that denied her son a prayer. They dug her rest under the old willow tree on the hill. Above her grave, a wooden marker read, "Clara Ellsworth, a mother's love, a healer's spirit, a heart that did not break even when they tried." No hymns, no preachers, only silence and lowered hats. And when the last shovelful of soil was laid, the sky turned to ember, lit with the fading glow of redemption. Martha turned and realized Clara's chest was no longer rising. As Martha walked away, Daniel stopped and knelt, pressing his palm to the fresh earth. "Thank you," he whispered, and the wind through the willow answered. The sun was low when Martha found it. A folded sheet, stained but untouched by dirt, tucked neatly inside Clara's worn coat. No name on the outside, but Martha knew without doubt it was meant for her. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it carefully, sitting under the willow's shade. Daniel played quietly nearby, pulling grass between his fingers. The air carried the hush of dusk, the kind that feels like a breath between endings and beginnings. The letter began simply, Martha, if you are reading this, then I am where I always hoped to be, beside those I've loved and lost, and beyond the reach of misunderstanding. I forgive this town. I forgive you. I held no anger, only grief unanswered, and prayers unanswered longer. Your boy has a spark, brighter and braver than any flame they'll light to spite you. Let him grow, knowing he was wanted, even when some hearts refused to say it aloud. I ask one thing of you. Tell my story right. Don't let them remember me as a curse. Tell them I was a woman with a hurt that didn't get healed until I tried to heal someone else's. Martha's breath caught as she read the last line written in careful script. I did not die for magic. I lived for love and paid its price gladly. Martha pressed the letter to her chest. Tears rolled down her cheeks, soft as rain on open soil. She saved you, she whispered to Daniel. She saved us both. Daniel looked up from his play, meeting her eyes with a tenderness too big for his years. Can we come back here again, Mama? He asked. So she's not lonely? Martha nodded, her voice choked. We will, every year. And they did. Years turned seasons over like pages. Daniel grew into a quiet boy with gentle eyes and a curious spirit. Every birthday, Martha took him to the Willow. They left flowers, told stories, sometimes laughed, sometimes cried. But the story didn't stay buried. Martha became a traveler. She saddled a horse now and then, rode into nearby towns, lantern light on her weathered face. When she spoke, folks listened not because she demanded it, but because her voice carried something truer than legend. She told Clara's tale not as a witch or a fraud, but as a mother whose love reached across death's threshold. She spoke of how pain makes people cruel, how kindness can be mistaken for threat, how sometimes a miracle looks like a woman refusing to stop praying. And people leaned in. Some wept quietly. Others hung their heads low. A few stood up, arms crossed, but stayed anyway. She taught me something, Martha would say at the end of each fireside story, that sometimes the only magic that ever mattered was love we didn't understand. In time, the hills whispered her words. Clara's story became one handed down like a worn coin, traded, polished, treasured. And though some chose to keep their doubt, many more chose to believe. And above that willow on the hill, wildflowers grew in every season, as if rooted from two mothers' prayers stitched beneath the soil. Martha spoke her last tale on a quiet evening years later, her hair silver, her posture bent, but her voice strong. This was one of many true Western stories, she said, leaning close to the fire. If it stirred your spirit, saddle up with us. There's always another trail worth following. She stood, lantern in hand, turning toward the long road ahead. Behind her, the people stayed quiet, the echoes of her words following like hoofbeats in the night. This was one of many true Western stories. If it stirred your heart, saddle up with us for the next ride where every soul finds its frontier.